Hello there, and welcome to season 11 of the Bitcoin Takeover podcast. I am Vlad, and today I have a very special guest of whom I am a big fan, as I have been using MercuryWallet for quite some time. And his name is Gregory. He works at CommerceBlock, which is a company of which he is the CEO. I'm not entirely sure to which extent he developed by himself, MercuryWallet, but it's a big deal today in Bitcoin privacy. And it's quite an honor to have this conversation today and find out more. So hello, sir.
Hi, Vlad. Thanks for having us on your show.
So just for the record, if there's anything wrong about my introduction and the way that I presented you, let me know.
That's fine. There is a team behind MercuryWallet. I'm one of many people. Just to be clear on that. But yeah, thanks.
Right. So when I was last week I was in Prague, right? I was attending a conference and I was speaking with someone about privacy wallets that we have today in Bitcoin. And I came to the topic of Mercury. And I told him, it's this very cool layer 2 wallet which uses Statechains and basically exchanges UTXOs with someone else. And they asked me, okay, so how does it work? And that's when I got lost. I had no idea what to say any further than this. And I've asked Max Hilbrand, who is associated with Wasabi, and his reply was magic. So I'm finally happy that I get to find out more about how this works.
Cool. Yeah, I think it's magic as well. So we're on the same page there. But happy to answer any questions or give a high-level intro.
Right. So I open MercuryWallet right now and I tried to do a coin swap. What's happening there?
So although some people call Mercury a privacy wallet, it certainly achieves privacy in our view. It's fundamentally a layer 2 solution. So obviously the first layer 2 solution in Bitcoin was probably arguably sidechains, if you don't include custodial exchanges. And then obviously now you have, and sidechains is essentially creating a blockchain on top of a blockchain. And then you have obviously the more well-known Lightning, which is a way of kind of like creating these payment channels, which are essentially caches of Bitcoin transactions with different members. And then you have Statechains, which in our view is the third, kind of layer 2 solution for Bitcoin. Essentially, it takes a coin, which, as a UTXO, and it keeps a collection of states of it. Those states represent transitions. So what does this mean? This really takes a UTXO or its private key and allows us to send it around to each other. And that's it. At a very high level, that's all we're doing. We're sending around private keys. So nothing amazing there. But then where's the problem of sending private keys? If I have a private key and send it to you, how do I forget it? How do I not use it? That's the issue. And that's where the kind of the magic comes. So there's some, clever cryptography that was done by, my co-founder, Dr. Tom Trevethan, around kind of using two-party ECS, EDSA, and NPC to basically create these kind of key shares. So what MercuryWallet does, when you come into MercuryWallet, you create this kind of like Statecoin address, which is basically a normal Bitcoin address where you deposit Bitcoin into. At that point, what we do is we create 2 key shares. One private key is held by the user. One private key is held by the Statechain entity, which in our world is Mercury. And essentially, you deposit Bitcoin into that. And that is a special kind of Bitcoin address. But now you, with your private key, can now send that private key to other users. And you cooperate with Mercury. And Mercury will basically delete its copy of that private key. But Mercury itself never has custody. That private key on its own can't retrieve the funds. All it can do is cooperate with the client, which would be yourself, to do a movement. Now, what happens if Mercury was to, say, vanish, be shut down for whatever reason, or just have hardware or software failure? The client always has what we call is a backup transaction, where they can take their funds and rebroadcast their state coins to the Bitcoin blockchain. So, that's where it's kind of cool. It's kind of like, it's non-custodial in that sense, in that, you always have control of your funds. It's not censorship resistant, so you do have to work with the server to transfer your private keys. But if the server was to vanish or not allow a transfer, you can always retrieve your funds. And that's basically using this kind of key way of like kind of sharing a private key with the server.
It's definitely interesting because it's the hot topic right now in Bitcoin privacy. And as we see this CoinJoin wars taking place with Wasabi and Samurai, there are people who turn to coin swaps with Mercury and they're like, yes, this is the solution, which I think is better and makes more sense because it makes your transactions or UTXOs truly untraceable. But there are also risks involved, right? Like, how do you know you're not going to get a worse UTXO than the one that you have?
Yeah, so like, as always, there's pluses and minuses. The improvement of a coin swap over a coin join is you don't get this kind of coin join transaction on the Bitcoin blockchain, which, as you know, exchanges can say, hey, if you participated in coin join, you're bad. Or there isn't any of that on-chain tape, which is a good thing, yeah? The negative is that you could end up with a nasty coin or a not so good coin, and you may be tainted with that history. What we've done to negate that is, we every time a swap occurs, we attest this to the Bitcoin blockchain. So if you were to ever end up with a coin which is tainted or marked as undesirable by one of the chain analysis companies, which I never think makes sense anyway, you could say, well, I participated in a coin swap. It was never mine in the first place. And that's the solution in our view. And we still don't know how chain analysis or exchanges are going to deal with coin swap coins because, we're still quite small. But we do have other solutions that we're building to also resolve that. So you could swap into a lightning channel, etc. But that's, the current situation when you compare it to a coin join. And, we did a panel. I went to a panel at Bitcoin Miami a few weeks ago. And, I think coin joins versus coin swaps. I mean, I think there were people there who'd worked at Wasabi and Samurai did, but we see them as complementing each other, not necessarily as competition. Yeah, it's a different type of mechanism to basically get your privacy.
It's really nice that you foreshadowed my questions because I was about to inquire about whether or not people should choose between coin swaps and coin joins and what are the different trade-offs that you find in the different situations. But yes, you're right about coin exchanges flagging coin joins. It happened to me very recently with a Swiss exchange. Basically, they banned my IBAN and they made me, submit further documentation. And I was like, forget about it. I've had enough. I get it. But we got to work to make this truly fungible.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of misconceptions about privacy that, I think you probably know as well as anyone. The moment you say Bitcoin privacy, people think, they think nefarious things, whereas all we want is the same privacy as PayPal or using a bank account. And I think that's hopefully that's going to change. Like, I don't know who uses Mercury. Some of the users do contact me. It seems to be people that are trying to do basic supply chain stuff, like, maybe buying things from overseas, and they don't necessarily want their suppliers. Like, I spoke to one guy in Miami. He does privacy because he buys, things for protein shakes, the powders from protein shakes from offshore companies, like companies in Asia and stuff. He doesn't necessarily want them to know, what's on their Bitcoin addresses. And I think that's where we've got to start being realistic. This is just about making Bitcoin work like normal money, which it is. We've all read the white paper. It's peer-to-peer cash, and that's all privacy is, nothing else. Mercury is a layer 2 solution, so it helps Bitcoin achieve a bit more scalability, but it has a privacy angle in that because we're doing this off-chain.
Yes, I have yet to get Ruben Somson on the podcast because he has been working on these Statechains for, I guess, 5 or 6 years now. And he has come up with...
Yeah, he wrote the original paper of the Statechain concept. We're very different to what he wrote in the paper because his paper was reliant on technology in Bitcoin that hasn't been released yet, things like any Preval, which is part of L2. So, we're very different, but, it is the same concept, the movement of private keys, the sending around of UTXOs.
It's definitely interesting, and I'm still not sure I understand how it works, but at the same time, it's so brilliant.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I think the best way to call it is virtual open dimes. I don't know if you're aware of, open dimes. These basically these USB sticks with Bitcoin in them. we've just made them virtual. And that's the way to think of them. So, and the way we do privacy is, a few people could put some of these virtual open dimes into a jar, shake it, take a different out. So long as they're the same denominations, it should work.
I like the idea of open dimes. I'm not sure I like the implementation, which is not truly open source. But I do get your point. And at the same time, I'm a big fan of the idea of Bitcoin banknotes or paper money, which is backed 1-to-1 or 100% by existing reserves of Bitcoin. But I still haven't figured out how this can be done with cryptography instead of custodians that hold these Bitcoins.
Well, these state coins, funny enough, in the last few days, there's been people talking about it on Twitter. But, these state coins could be just, fixed they are fixed denominations. So they do look like fixed Bitcoin notes, if you see what I mean. They're fixed denominations, so you can build up a portfolio or a holding of Bitcoin in a kind of a selection of state coins. And they're fully backed. The state coin always represents a Bitcoin, which you can see on the Bitcoin blockchain. It's fully transparent. So, and a few people have said, well, could you use state coins to basically do payments and stuff, because it's all off chain, it's totally private, and you have these fixed denominations. And maybe people are going to build that. We had some we've had some calls this week where people have said, well, we potentially want to do this in our wallet and build off your Mercury servers that are kind of managing the Statechains itself. So we'll see. Maybe someone's going to kind of build that in the next few years or so.
Yes, so this is a recurring obsession in Bitcoin with scalability. And they used to criticize coin joins because they don't scale. As far as I know, with Wasabi 2.0, they figured out a way to make them more scalable with more efficient batching. And I think with Schnorr, they're going to become even better. But how do coin swaps and what MercuryWallet does, how does it scale? Is it really feasible on a grander scale, or is it just maybe a few dozens or hundreds of people who are willing to pay the fee and are interested in privacy?
Well, it is a scalability solution, because once you take one of these UTXOs and put them on a state coin, you can move it around a significant amount of times off chain. And because they're fixed UTXOs, we do take a fee, but we only take a fee on withdrawal from the state chain. And in that period, the UTXOs can be sent as many times as people like. We time lock them for 3 months. That's part of the security protocol. But essentially, there is an opportunity, and this is where, when comparing to, say, coin swaps and the coin join, the way we've implemented it, we can't charge per coin swap. As you know, Wasabi, Samurai, they do charge. We couldn't even if we wanted to, because these are happening off chain. So somebody could come into our wallet and leave the coin for auto swap. We actually have a button that says auto swap, and leave it there for a couple of months, and they could have done hundreds, maybe 1,000 coin swaps. And that's one of the advantages of taking things off chain, and that's why a lot of these all of the layer 2 solutions are essentially off chain. Sidechains is an off chain protocol, Lightning is, and Statechains are as well. So it's not the scalability solution for Bitcoin, but it's one of them. And in our roadmap, we're looking to do more integration with the Lightning network. So I think some of the challenges with Lightning could be solved with state coins, and some of our limitations in the state chain concept could be solved with Lightning. So I think they complement each other quite well.
That makes a lot of sense. And I find it funny because in Bitcoin, usually monetization is an afterthought. People usually build stuff that they find useful for themselves or for people they know, and they make it work. And after that, they think, okay, so how can we make money off of this? As you said, you cannot collect fees as practically or efficiently as Wasabi or Samurai, who has coordinator fees. But what is MercuryWallet's, plan to become profitable somehow?
Yeah, well, we do take a fee at the moment for when people use create a state coin. We take a fee on withdrawal, but we plan to basically void that fee in the next release, the next major release, which is probably a couple of months away, where we would take a fee up front for the creation of a state coin, and that would be a Lightning fee. So the creation of these state coins, we are going to charge for them, because We have to run servers on the back end. We've got to do a bit of cryptography. It's quite CPU intensive. So that would be our fee. So, our pricing model is very much as a layer 2 as opposed to any privacy services we provide. So it's a bit more like using a sidechain as opposed to a coin join or implementation.
I hear a lot of critics saying that this is way too complicated and the average user will not implement any of this or not work with it. I'm not sure if this is a matter of UI or if it's meant to be complicated for the purpose of obtaining privacy, but there are still advocates who want, for example, to implement something like confidential transactions, or I'm not sure if rank signatures, but something dealing with ZK, zero knowledge proofs. And do you see any potential for changes to be made into the main chain state of Bitcoin? Because as far as I know, we're going to hard fork sometime in the next 50 years to fix some bug. So they might as well add some privacy. Do you see that happening?
Well, I think Statechains architecturally are one of the more simpler approaches. Maybe I'm talking about the cryptography or talking about NPC, and that throws people off. But I like to think we've designed the UI from a point of view where it's simple. You create a coin, you deposit, you move it around. And we've worked hard on the UI side of things to do that. In terms of complexity, I think that's a job of the UI. We obviously talk a lot about the technology behind, because there's a trust model. We want the Bitcoin community to trust the code. It's open source. In this world, people need to trust the technology solutions you've made. But I think the UI has simplified it. I mean, I struggled to use Wasabi and Samurai. Well, I've never used Samurai because it's mobile. But the early version of Wasabi, I struggled to use, and I'm someone who uses Bitcoin more than maybe the average person out there. So I think we spent a lot of time improving that. In terms of changes to Bitcoin, I don't see it. You may notice it's very hard to make changes to Bitcoin at the moment. Obviously there's the SegWit wars. The Taproot wasn't easy, and there's some current drama at the moment. But the change of adding confidential transactions, I can't see that happening, because there are some issues around privacy on the main chain where potentially we can't audit the blockchain as much as easy. So, and one of the core features of Bitcoin is having 21 million coins. If we changed Bitcoin to a point where we couldn't audit the blockchain to see the 21 million, I think that'd be quite controversial. So at the moment, it's not something I see happening, not anytime soon, that without significant battle scars.
Oh, as far as I know, there's some very smart cryptography in Zcash, which makes auditability a lot easier. I'm not sure if they figured everything out, but I hope that they do, and we're going to use some sort of zero knowledge proofs. I'm not sure what you think about that.
Zero knowledge proofs was originally discussed in Bitcoin many years ago. If you ever want to do a Google on Bitcoin Talk, it was called Coin Witness. I think it was proposed by a guy called Greg Maxwell, who's obviously designed a lot of things. I think he designed coin joins and coin swaps.
Yeah,
I think, tends to be a bright guy, has a good idea. But I think if you read the post, which I actually read about 6 months ago, it came up once. It's significant changes to Bitcoin. It's just significant changes, and I don't think it's going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years anyway. So.
I agree. It's very difficult. It's always contentious. And the more of these bankster people I see getting involved in the space, like you said, you were in Miami. And if you look at the main stage, they were not Bitcoin OGs. They were not the ones who built this space. They were just people who basically thought that Bitcoin was a good idea. And
there was an interesting dynamic. There was an interesting dynamic in Miami. You had the main stage, which was more like a rock concert. You had the open source stage in the corner where I guess the geeks and the nerds were hanging out. So it was fun though. But it was a strange situation having 20,000 people there. So
yeah, what I mean is that big money might not be in favor of privacy, and also
I think the more Bitcoin has big money, the harder it's going to be to change. To get agreement on what to change it to is going to be difficult. I think the word people use about Bitcoin is ossification. If Bitcoin goes to $100,000 a coin or $1 million a coin, I struggle to see people getting consensus to change it, honestly. I think it'll just become ossified and unchangeable. We're not there yet. That's why I think, getting changes in now would be a good thing. But if it grows, I just don't see it ever changing. That's my view. And that's my view from seeing how software in other parts of the world work. Like, for example, I think IPv6 was proposed in the late 90s. It's still not fully rolled out. When something grows so big, when a protocol grows so big, it's very hard to reach consensus to change.
Yeah, I see your point there. But let's get back to MercuryWallet and Statechains, because I have this curiosity about how this is different from using Liquid with confidential transactions and then withdrawing without a peg out via Lightning Network and then closing the Lightning channel.
Sure. So, I mean, there are security security differences between Liquid. Liquid is arguably custodial. It has a federation, but the federation could cooperate to not approve a transaction or essentially seize the funds. Mercury doesn't have that. It's, the server alone cannot seize the funds. Even if the Mercury backend had a federation, they could not seize the funds. However, there is an attack vector. In theory, Mercury could work with a previous owner of a coin and cooperate to take the funds. But the latest owner would have a backout transaction that would prove that's the case. So that's the security mechanism. That's the security trade-off. In terms of comparing to confidential transactions, well, confidential transactions, it's not total privacy. It just hides the amount. So if I was to send you an X amount of, I think, liquid Bitcoin on Liquid, you would see a transaction between me and you. You just wouldn't see the number. So while that's private, and definitely an improvement, it's not total privacy. There's still some taint that shows that me and you would have interacted. Whereas with Mercury being off chain, the swap would be totally blinded. You wouldn't be able to see what's happened. I would enter a swap of, say, X amount of other coins. The swap would happen. There would be no linkability at that point there.
Yes. I mean, this is useful to understand as both Liquid and Statechains are considered to be layer 2 solutions. I mean, I'm not sure to which extent Blockstream calls Liquid a layer 2, but
it's a layer 2. It's a layer 2. I mean, we built sidechains before we built Liquid, before we built Mercury. So CommerceBlock's previous business model was taking the same code as Liquid, and we modified it for various clients to do kind of more bespoke work. Now that didn't take off, and that's why we ended up going in a different direction. So Liquid, like sidechains, is definitely a layer 2. It's just it hasn't had the kind of the pickup or the for whatever reason. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why it just hasn't picked up the way other layer 2s have. I think Lightning is picking up momentum, and let's be honest, a lot of people use things like Ethereum or whatever wrapped Bitcoin as a layer 2 for Bitcoin, whether you like that or not. But that's where the volumes are.
Yeah, I also like to think that every other, I guess, blockchain that's not Bitcoin is basically converging towards becoming a sidechain for Bitcoin, as they all brag about integrating wrapped Bitcoin of sorts. All the Ethereum clones are dealing with Bitcoin, and they brag about Bitcoin on DeFi and stuff like that. It's just clear what the best form of money is, and they're just becoming sidechains with different trade-offs. It's only a matter of time until, I guess, they give up on their native token and just embrace BTC.
I think there's some truth to that. I would say Ethereum, Solana, if you look at how much wrapped Bitcoin they are Bitcoin sidechains. They probably don't want to admit that, but it does look like that. And I think there's a reason. There's a lot of reasons why. That's probably another podcast in itself, but that's definitely the case. But I still think there's a space for native layer 2 solutions which are non-custodial, not Coinbase or not an exchange. And I think the leaders at the moment very much Lightning. We kind of see ourselves as fitting in there.
Yes. Also about Lightning, if you spend about a week on Twitter, you're going to discover that there are people who call Lightning very private, and they think it's the solution to making Bitcoin private. And then there are the ones who say, no, this is not private at all. You should not advertise Lightning as being private, because they're going to point out that Chainalysis is into it. And it's actually interesting to me that all of these commerce giants that were on the stage of the Bitcoin Miami conference actually did this after Chainalysis started surveilling the chain. So how do you describe Lightning in terms of privacy?
I'm not going to claim to be a bit of an expert on Lightning privacy. I think for sending, it's pretty private because it uses onion routing. I think for receiving, I think that becomes less private. But ultimately, I think the privacy of Lightning will be dictated by the size of the network. Meaning, if there's lots of decentralized nodes, Lightning nodes, and for me to send you a routing payment, if that just goes through one node called, I don't know, Visa or Mastercard, I presume the thing's not going to be very private. If it has a nice graph of multiple hops, that would. But then I think the debate of whether that can ever be achieved in Lightning is still not clear. I mean, Lightning's very complex, and I think the consensus in the talks I went to at Miami is it's not that private, and then there needs to be work to be done. And some people believe that if you mix Lightning with sidechains, Statechains, you improve its privacy. And we're certainly looking at helping out there and doing some stuff with Lightning.
Yeah, there's a lot of truth to that, and usually also in the case of coin joins, the more participants you have, the better. What do you call them?
Anonymity set.
Exactly. Yeah. Anonymity set you get. And also the reason why we consider Bitcoin to be potentially more private than Monero, for example, is that there are fewer users on Monero. So if they're public about their use of Monero, it's easy to discriminate between them and figure out, okay, so this must be this guy and he must be transacting with that guy. We cannot see much about their transaction, but we can figure out what they're up to. Also, Zcash is much worse, specifically because it has these shielded transactions, which are in a minority, and everything else is open. I think there was this funny moment when someone was able to determine somebody else's shielded Zcash address from his unshielded one. It was hilarious.
Yeah, I don't know much about Zcash, if I'm honest. I mean, I'm a fan of Monero. I'm not one of these guys, Bitcoin Maxi. I think Monero's got some cool stuff. But you're right. I think the issue with Monero is always going to be liquidity and how many people are using it. Although it does seem to be getting a lot more use, and its blocks seems to have a lot more going on. But but it's a different. I think it's a different approach to Bitcoin. They hard fork a lot more often. They're actively doing things to stay decentralized, which is interesting, but it comes with risk. Like their random X approach of keeping mining decentralized is pretty cool, but who knows if it works or not. But I think it's great what they're doing. I think it's good that we do have coins that are trying to do things like that, because there's stuff that can be learned.
Golden Bitcoin on Voltoro, golden Bitcoin on Voltoro, golden Bitcoin on Voltoro, golden Bitcoin on Voltoro.
Voltoro is the exchange where you deal with honest and hard money. There's no fiat on-ramp or off-ramp, and you get to diversify your Bitcoin portfolio into gold or silver when you sense that a bearish moment is coming. Also, you can instantly trade your gold for Bitcoin to buy the dip. And if you're into gold custody, Voltoro can also send you the gold that you own directly from their insured Swiss vaulting facilities. Voltoro was launched in the aftermath of the Mt. Gox hack, so since 2015, they have published monthly glass books to prove that they own all the gold reserves and all of their customers' money. Sign up today by going to voltoro.com/Bitcoin takeover. Keep in mind that this is not financial advice and you are responsible for your own decisions. Wasabi Wallet is the perfect Bitcoin privacy wallet. It's free, it's open source, it's available on Windows, macOS, and Linux, and it offers groundbreaking Chaumian coin joins, which makes your Bitcoin. Even if you do not use the coin join feature, you still benefit from a trustless experience with block filters, a hidden IP address via Tor, and easy management of your wallet outputs. After you deal with KYC exchanges like Coinbase, like Kraken, Binance, Gemini, or Bitfinex, you can remove the association between your identity and your Bitcoin address by performing a few rounds of coin joins. To find out more about the privacy benefits and limitations of coin joins, listen to Bitcoin Takeover Podcast Season 6, Episode 6 with Max Hilbrand. And if you want to give Wasabi a try, go to wasabiwallet.io and download the wallet for free. Wasabi Wallet, a Bitcoin privacy wallet for the citadels.
Yeah. Sometimes I like to joke to my friends that if Bitcoin fails because of people like Michael Saylor and all the others who promote it as something that it's not, and the node runners are going to reject new code proposals, I mean, you might just see me putting on a mask and starting the Monero Takeover podcast, I guess.
Well, I get confused every time Michael Saylor says Bitcoin's property, because Bitcoin to me is money. So if it's not being used to buy things, what's the point? So it's I think we've got to make sure Bitcoin's being used as money, because then it doesn't really have any value in my view. And that's
and there was a lot of this talk. So I'm happy that you're in Miami. I guess you're the first. No, you're not the first from this season who went there, but you're first with whom I talk about this, because as far as I could see as an observer who only watched the main stage live stream, what I can get from the context is that they're trying to subtly push Bitcoin as just a network to transact stable coins and basically create more demand for the US dollar. And it seems like Alex Gladstein spoke about why people need the dollar. Then there was Michael Saylor, who was like, never sell your Bitcoin, just borrow dollars against it. It's kind of mind-blowing. Are we even replacing the dollar anymore? Or is this just like an intermediary network which helps you transact dollars? It's getting confusing.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that depends where you are in the world geographically. I think obviously Bitcoin Miami was an American conference. A lot of the people there are pro the US dollar. But, 80% of the world don't have access to dollars. They don't have access to bank accounts. They need something. And that's where I think, at the same time, if you look at other projects like Paxful, they've created a whole kind of peer-to-peer ecosystem on Bitcoin, where Bitcoin is the main currency and part of the circular economy. And I think that's where it's interesting. But, for people who live in, Europe or the US, the euro and the dollar kind of works if you ignore inflation. And they're quite happy to keep on using the dollar and the euro and call Bitcoin property and never spend it. But, I want to see Bitcoin being spent. I want it to be circular. We need Bitcoin to be spent for transaction fees, because it's all right now where miners are making good money on the Coinbase transactions. But at some point in the future, unless people are using Bitcoin, there's not going to be any, there needs to be people paying transaction fees to keep the network secure. And that's where the security comes from, yeah?
I very much agree with this. And I find it very interesting that we have use cases which are agreed upon and people say, oh, yes, we should fill the blocks with Lightning channel openings and closings. And someone actually did the math of how long it would take for every person on the planet to have at least one channel open with somebody else to decentralize the Lightning network and make it truly, work at scale. But then you have people who use it for counterparty or omni, and they get frowned upon, even though they pay the same transaction fee.
Yeah, and what was the original project that spanned Bitcoin blockchain? Was it Satoshi Dice? Do you remember when there was all that drama because they were spamming the network with all these gambling stuff? And then I think a few years ago there was a project that was spamming Bitcoin as well. Was it Veryblock? Do you remember that? But
I'm not sure. I remember Satoshi Dice because it was a big deal. But what's the other one?
Veryblock. If you Google that a few years ago, I think maybe just as much as 2 years ago, they represented a significant percentage of all Bitcoin transactions, and they were just doing attestations to secure their blockchain, which was kind of like, I really don't know what it did, but I remember seeing that. But in answer to what was your original question? Did I just go off on one?
I'm not sure if it was a question. It was more of a remark that on one hand, we agree that we need fees, but on the other hand, we say, oh, no, not these fees. We want the other ones.
Well, it's an open permissionless network. We can't tell people who to use it. We accept that. And I think Bitcoin as it is today can't have a lightning channel for everyone. I don't think it can support 7 billion lightning channels. But I don't think we're there yet. And there are scalability solutions that would help us share lightning channels. I think. Okay, so I've said sidechains, lightning, and Statechains are layer 2s. There are people building like the Fedwin stuff, which is arguably, you could call it a layer 3. But some of the stuff they're doing could help scale this to another level, so we could get more and more people using or sharing lightning channels or sharing Statecoin. So I think that there is good research happening in that, so that we can work with the existing blockchain itself.
Yeah, and where I was getting with this is that Bitcoin, before being a store of value, digital gold, or whatever narrative they're trying to push, it's software. And basically it can be whatever we want it to be. It's whatever we use it for.
I agree with you. It's just software. It's a better form of money. And the people who got in early, I don't know where you got in, but I knew about Bitcoin because people were buying stuff online. There were a few guys talking about it going to $1 million. But I don't think anyone ever believed it. Definitely when I got into it, it was a way of buying certain things online, and we'll leave it on there. But that's what it is, and it's a more efficient way of doing things online.
Yeah, I got in when I deserve, I guess, because I found out very early. I thought it was a bad idea. Then I was actually assigned a university presentation about Bitcoin. And I didn't buy any because I thought 1 unit is too expensive for me. It was like my monthly rent at the time. Mm-hmm. And then I came back at 3,000 and was like, oh, this Bitcoin idea might be, worth a shot.
Yeah, I when I first read about it, I wasn't impressed. I was like, 10 minutes? Who's going to wait in a bar or pub for 10 minutes? This is never going to work. So I don't know how much money that cost me not buying it then, but then I guess it was the community around it. I saw so much, a lot of engineering happening, a lot of good developers were doing stuff that I thought was worth. And then the penny dropped when I realized it isn't just like some cryptographic coin or some improvement on Amazon gift cards. It's actually a whole network. And when you have a private key, you don't really have you have like a key to the network. And that's when I realized, okay, this is cool.
Yeah, and back to the idea that Bitcoin is software. I remember it was, I think, last year when there was Udi Wertheimer who started pushing the meme that Bitcoin is digital real estate. And that was also when the US Congress had a special hearing about what Bitcoin is, and they tried to figure out how they should regulate it. And it's all of these narratives that make politicians believe that it's something else other than software. And I think the best definition that I got for Bitcoin concerns free speech and the fact that you can also use it for expression. The message in the first block is Chancellor on the brink of second bailout for banks, which Satoshi Nakamoto put there. It's a political statement. It's free speech. And some say it's an NFT for whatever reason, because it's an up return transaction. But it's still pretty cool, and it basically defines the project as nothing else but expression against the establishment. I don't think it should be regulated as money or as gold or whatever. It's free speech, and I think it should be protected under the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution.
Yeah, and you talk about regulation. I'm an ex-banker. Before you hate me, I wrote software for banks, and I started off on the trade floor doing kind of more derivatives pricing. Then I ended up working for one of the big American banks in risk. And when people say Bitcoin is can be used for money laundering, it really winds me up, because Bitcoin is the last thing you want to use for nefarious activities. It's a public blockchain. For you to do anything dubious with Bitcoin, there's a touch point. There's a touch point of going from Bitcoin to fiat or buying a house, or that you can regulate. I'm fine with that. But when people start saying you need to take the blockchain with KYC addresses, I think, what's the point? You're making it unusable. And the reality is I think we all know about the Silk Road. People were able to take it down. In fact, the guys that went after the Silk Road were so good, they got the dodgy FBI agents that were taping us stuff on the side. That's how good it was. So maybe it's too good. Maybe regulators don't like it because people on the side can't take their little bits and bobs. But I mean, that's the reality. It's not great for doing nefarious work. It isn't. And money laundering is the concept of taking dirty money and putting it into a physical entity to make it look clean. Bitcoin doesn't help with that. It doesn't add or negate that at all.
I very much agree with this. And at the same time, I want to introduce to you a concept which maybe seems wild or counterintuitive, especially to those who approach Bitcoin from a very ideological point of view. But I came up with... Oh, my cat got in the room. Sorry, I got distracted. So I came up with this idea when I heard about Wasabi basically blacklisting some addresses. I realized, okay, so now that they tell who can join and they tell who cannot join, there's going to be no excuse for exchanges to refuse coin joins from them. And that's what kind of blew my mind. Like, okay, so can you turn this into a bridge which takes coins that are out there with unknown, origins and put them on exchanges so you can spend them, or sell them to merchants that are going to sell to exchanges and they're not going to have any kind of problems. And I think this is how a fungible currency should operate. Right now you have the non-KYC coins, which get traded between users peer-to-peer on certain networks. And then you have the ones that have been KYC due to regulations, and there's a very large supply of them. And I feel like privacy should be for everyone, and not only for that. So it shouldn't just be about getting gray area money and getting them on some KYC service. It should also be about withdrawing from these services, like Coinbase, which hired hacking team to surveil all outgoing transactions, so they even know how you spend it after you withdraw from them. Like, there's a legit use case for coin joins for that. And maybe that users who get their coins off from Coinbase want to get on Kraken, but without Kraken knowing that they come from Coinbase. So there should be a mixer for that. You can disagree with me, but the samurai people
the thing is that
crucified me for saying something like, you need a
coin join is just an aggregation of transactions. I mean, you could argue, if you look at the Bitcoin blockchain, some of the, obviously when you go to an exchange these days, exchanges have done quite a good job of batching transactions to reduce their fees. Some of those batches at times look like a coin join, because they've basically munged everyone's transactions to one. And that's all a coin join is. And, the whole blacklisting thing, obviously, it'd be hard for us to implement blacklisting if you're going to ask us, because we operate in a blinded way. But it doesn't really make sense. It just doesn't, because all that's going to happen is people are either going to coin join those, they're going to use things like Join Market, or they're going to kind of use the swapping services like submarine swaps into Lightning channels. And somehow people like Chainalysis and Elliptic are kind of like these unregulated companies that are selling services to provide a service which no one understands. that's the reality. No one really understands it. It's like, are the coins chainalysis? That when I talk to regulators sometimes, they say, well, have the coins been chainalysis? I go, what does that mean? What it means is it a clean coin? I said, I can clean any coins. I can move to like an Electrum wallet and back, and I can move it 10 times, and then I pass chainalysis. And I just think that's kind of the issue we have right now. It's just a lack of understanding from people making these decisions, and some dubious marketing by people like Chainalysis and stuff, selling fiction about certain coins. Yeah, I mean, no one knows what Chainalysis really do. Why is my coin dirty and yours clean? It just doesn't always make sense. And if they were associated with a hack, well, what does that mean? If they've gone through a few DeFi services, or it's just not something that's scalable, in my view.
I agree with the scalability issue, but at the same time, as you mentioned, you can transact your coins back and forth from Electrum into another wallet to different addresses, and you can clean them, but that's costly and that doesn't scale either.
No, but you could move them to Lightning if you want to deposit to a block. If you want to deposit into an exchange, and the exchange bounces them, and if they don't freeze them, then you put them into a Lightning channel, and then you keep it in a Lightning channel and participate in the Lightning circular economy.
So would you say that this is better than maybe using like 3 different mixers to lose the trace?
Well, I would never. Well, okay, so a mixer is custodial. I would never use one of those. That's a risk. I don't know how Chainalysis companies work. I don't know what they do under the covers. I just think the model's broken. I mean, I wouldn't recommend. Whatever I recommend, Chainalysis could change things, but I'm just saying that the whole concept of marking coins doesn't work. It's kind of broken. And companies like Wasabi seem to have been forced to do something that doesn't make any logical sense.
I mean, I can see some use cases for that, but you can also disagree with me.
I mean, you mean like a use case in that you'll have white-collar privacy.
And also, it's like the bridge, right? If you want to get on exchanges and you don't want to have any problems, you mix with something else, and then you get on the ZK Snacks coordinator, and that's how you know that there's no reason for it to get rejected when you get on some KYC service, and that's when you know that
you don't. But do you know that these KYC services would accept them because they've now gone through Wasabi, who have a blacklist?
Right, but there is no reason for them to reject them anymore, I guess.
I don't know. The exchanges I speak to in the UK now, they want proof of funds. So I'm not sure. I mean, that's how ridiculous it's become.
It's an uphill battle. Like you never know what the requirements are going to become tomorrow. But
that's why I think we need to focus on getting the narrative that privacy is simply a practicality of using crypto. It's nothing else. It's imagine. Okay, so we are, the company I work for, we operate fiat. But imagine we wanted to pay all our guys in Bitcoin. It would be very dubious because we'd have to, if we kept all our funds in one wallet, how do we keep things private from each other? There's a lot of challenges there. And privacy is more about making Bitcoin practical for day-to-day use cases. And I think exchange. I'm hoping that common sense will prevail and we don't have these conversations anymore. But it's probably not going to happen soon.
I hope that too. This is the final battle, I guess, for Bitcoin. And I look like a ghost because there is sun, blasting through the lens of my camera. But yeah, this is everything that we need to do for Bitcoin to win, to make it truly fungible and for fungibility, we need some degree of privacy. As I don't think that the future of money should involve a system where you can see how much your money your neighbor has and vice versa.
Absolutely. No, I agree. And I think we're heading there. I think, Lightning is going to make it very hard for people to not see this stuff as private anyway. And I think, if you look at the volumes on various services, layer 2s, they're growing. Our volumes are slightly growing. Still small, but they're growing. And I think the more this happens, the more the blockchain analysis companies, what they do just doesn't make sense anymore. And I'm hoping common sense will prevail.
You did mention something about a future update of MercuryWallet that's coming in a couple of months.
Sure.
And it's going to add some refinement in terms of how you collect your fee for the service. What else is coming? What is on the MercuryWallet roadmap?
Yeah, so Lightning, it's all at the moment. It's all about Lightning integration. So we want to take a Lightning fee up front, and that would essentially allow our servers to run more blinded. Meaning that privacy is not a switch where we just say we're private. We need to keep on tweaking it, improving it. But essentially, by taking a Lightning fee up front, and we would be able to show no on-chain taint. So as far as Mercury is concerned, it would not ever see a Bitcoin address. It would just issue a state coin, which would have a state coin address, but we would never see the Bitcoin address associated with it. And I think once we get that working, we can start being a lot more creative with how we integrate with Lightning. And that's our medium, short to medium roadmap. And we're also looking at making the state coin themselves more resemble like state coin bills, and maybe looking at how people could use state coins for payment. But we need to do some internal kind of workshops for that. But that I think that's definitely on the roadmap. That Lightning integration is where we're at.
Are there any other Bitcoin projects for privacy that you find interesting?
I'm not sure I'd say it's for privacy, but it's probably a privacy element. But the only other project I spend a lot of time looking at is the Fedimint stuff, which is building these kind of e-cash type Chomain mints. They have a Telegram group. They're using blinded signatures, which is something we're looking at, which is a way of kind of anonymously signing a transaction. And they're doing some interesting stuff, and I think it's maybe something we could integrate with in the future. But I think that's pretty cool stuff. The team, I don't know the guy's name, but they've made news recently. I think that's quite interesting. And I see that as not a layer 2, there's a layer 3. So, and that'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, I've heard about these. I don't know how to explain them either. They are kind of like side chains, if you ask me.
I'm not the best guy to talk about it, but essentially they build this kind of like collective. Well, there's two things to it. They build this collective group where they have a federation of members, and they issue these kind of actual main tokens. So they basically issue a token, but then that token represents a bit of Bitcoin. So it's totally off chain, and then and that's really. Yeah, so it kind of sits on top of layer 2s, and they connect. I think the implementation Fedimint is going to connect to Lightning. So the federation itself would manage a Lightning channel, a collection of Lightning channels, and that's a way of people grouping together. And potentially it's something interesting. I think there's a lot of research and work to be done, and it's something we're looking at as well. Maybe we would issue like a kind of like a token as well that represents a bit of a state coin. So, and I think that would be a way for us to get more scalability. So I think it's interesting research.
Right. I know that when it comes to Bitcoin privacy, you have 3 major elements, which are network level privacy. You have receiver's privacy and sender's privacy. And I think that the one that we are trying to solve the most is sender's privacy. As with receiving, you can always generate a different address, and as long as nobody else knows your XPub, you have a reasonable amount of privacy that's available to you. But what about network level privacy? What do you recommend people to use?
I mean, by default, we use Tor, the wallet as a Tor interface. In our features list, we plan to give people the option to switch to I2P. There's in our own internal testing, I2P is kind of, I wouldn't say faster. It may even be slower than Tor, but the performance is more consistent. So even though if you were to do like a ping, it may be 10% slower, it tends to have a more consistent performance. And, that's where we're looking. But, I2P may be a better solution than Tor right now because not many people are using it. If it had the same volume as Tor, maybe it'd have some of the same challenges. But yeah, internally we're always looking at those two things. But like, we haven't looked at any of the other network stuff like Dandelion or stuff. We haven't really paid attention. And a lot of the work we did is actually optimizing the way we use Tor. And this is one of the issues of building, a lot of layer twos use Tor. So, obviously, Samurai Wasabi use Tor. Liquid actually uses Tor. And it's a very hard environment to work on. I mean, I'm not knocking the Tor guys because they're fixing a hard problem anyway, but it does make UI challenges a lot more complex. And one of the first things we added after we went into alpha, we have a little icon on the top of our wallet, which is a Tor onion. So you can see all the connections that Tor makes. And if you're not happy, you can reset it. That was really out of just the challenges of working using Tor.
Yes, Tor seems to have gained a lot of popularity, but at the same time, I've had a few months ago on the show Harry Halpin from NIM. Do you know anything about NIM, and what do you think about it?
I don't know enough to comment. I know about them, but I haven't really gone into them, to be honest.
Okay, what about VPNs? There's always this debate whether or not you should use a VPN. Should you use a VPN and Tor on top?
It depends what you're doing. I mean, I use a VPN because I'm fed up of being spammed by junk and my ISP know anything about me. But I don't necessarily trust it implicitly. And the more hardcore people I use, I know they build a VPN on top of a VPN. They could piggyback. Mercury obviously uses Tor by the covers, even if I have a VPN. But sometimes it does make it harder to participate in a swap. The more layering you do, the slower and the more unreliable the network is. And sometimes I can't. Sometimes if Tor's having issues, I can't use a VPN anyway with Mercury. So that's something to factor in.
Yeah.
Sorry if I didn't really answer your question, but that's the reality of where we are.
That's usually a trade-off when you get privacy. You have to lower the speed. Do you think it has to be this way, or do you think we can have more elegant designs?
I would like to see a world where we have more mesh networks, and there's definitely some interesting research being done with that. But yeah, I would like us to. I mean, look, the internet is very centralized, and I think more mesh type networks. Getting out of hosting centers, people running their own nodes. I think that's where I think there's a lot of interesting research going on. Stuff that I've actually started paying more attention because of Mercury, because you look at like design ideas and how you can make Mercury a bit more distributed as well. So I think that's definitely increasing, but it's not easy as well because the bandwidth constraints right now are quite huge. And we talked at the beginning of the show about Mercury does some magic. That magic is complex cryptography, which is quite CPU intensive, and that's becomes a lot harder to do on a network here, where latency is a challenge.
Something else that I want to ask you right now concerns this whole debate that we're having in Bitcoin, which concerns BIP 119 for CTV, which I guess stands for Check Template Verify. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with the code. If you are, I would be happy if you commented. But I feel like this is also a political struggle, as this is about whether or not proposals come from Bitcoin Core and the core developers, or can also come from outside. And who's going to maintain this new opcode? And, there are lots of discussions that we are having about basically the politics of doing it and not necessarily the content of the code.
Yeah, well, first off, I don't know much about the code. I haven't looked at it. I know about governance because I looked at governance previously, because there are some governance opcodes in Liquid sidechain called, I think, checksig from hash. I'm really sitting on the fence. I think it's a positive thing what Jeremy Rubin's done, being not necessarily a Bitcoin core guy, but building an implementation is clearly. And I think creativity in the space is important. We need people to challenge the status quo, build new stuff. And I don't really like some of the narrative on Twitter that's saying this is an attack on Bitcoin. This is not. This is a guy who's clearly smart, who's making a proposal. I think the reality is that there just hasn't been enough understanding of what he's done, and there's not really a strong desire to build governance into Bitcoin now. I mean, that's the reality of it. I think hopefully what will come out of this is that kind of scope will change, and that people like, outsiders, or maybe guys that aren't necessarily I don't even know what Bitcoin core dev is. I mean, but someone that's not a lead maintainer of the code base is able to make proposals, because I do think we need creativity in this space. Because if Bitcoin does make $100,000, $1 million, it's going to ossify. So now is a chance where we can make changes. I mean, from a personal point of view, I don't. Obviously, when I say personal, from a MercuryWallet point of view, we would like to see the L2 stuff be proposed with any prev out, because that would make the way we build Statechains a lot easier. And I think that's a simpler change than CTV. And because of all the noise in the last few days, people have asked us, like, would you help with doing the any prev out stuff? And we would. But that's because some of the trade-offs in the way we built Statechains are because of a lack of L2. Like, we have this thing called a decrementing time log. So I think I told you a Statechain is valid, a Statecoin is valid for 3 months. Every time we do a transfer, we kind of reduce that time. With the any prev out stuff, that problem goes away, because we're able to update an existing Bitcoin transaction, and the Lightning guys want that as well. So that's where what we would like to see happen. So
it's definitely interesting to see different approaches to this and opinions. And I think that the guys who say that BIP 119 going into speedy trial is an attack on Bitcoin are the same ones who are buying into the digital gold narrative. And I even see people walking back on SegWit nowadays saying that it was a big mistake and it should have never happened, which I disagree.
Yeah, I think that's rubbish. I think SegWit was, Lightning would be 2 years further behind than where it was right now, or maybe more, without SegWit. And SegWit has, look, whether you like it or not, Bitcoin transaction fees are very low. And that's because a lot of people are using SegWit. And we've got to evolve the protocol where we can. And we can't, technology moves forward. It doesn't go backwards. We need to, improve Bitcoin before it becomes too big.
Yeah. And in your definition, too big means has too much fiat money invested into it, which means that people don't want to change anything at all.
Well, okay, so if Bitcoin hits the market cap of gold, can you imagine trying to make a change to that code base? It's going to be very political, very difficult.
But we're not too far away from that.
And because of the fork wars of 2017, changes are quite hard to do. If you saw Taproot, which was nothing major change, it was quite, there was a lot of debate for about 6 months. So I think the bigger we are, the more eyes we have on us, and the more risk there is of changing a network.
And there are still people who regret activating Taproot via speedy trial, because now it opened the floodgate for, proposing more soft forks and going into speedy trial with them.
Yeah, I mean, we've always taken a position to just build with the way Bitcoin is right now. So, we built Statechains based on the way the stack operates, and I don't really have much to add on that. So,
no, it's interesting that my point of view with this is that I got into Bitcoin while trying to escape politics, because that's what I studied in my previous life. And now I end up discovering the exact same, but under a different form.
You stick a few people in a room, you've got politics. Look, I got into Bitcoin. All my previous open source projects that I ever played with, they were all run by benevolent dictators. Whether that's Linux with Linus Torvald, or I was doing a lot of Java work, there was a lot of Java projects. They tended to have dictators. Now, Bitcoin doesn't have a dictator, which is its strength. But that's why I think the open source nature means it's very political. But ossification is a strength as well. At least for people like us building MercuryWallet, we know the Bitcoin blockchain, the consensus rules is not going to change very often. And if it does change, they do respect backward compatibility. So it does make it easier for people like us to build on Bitcoin. So, whereas if it was a blockchain, say like, I don't know, I won't badmouth other blockchains, but where the rules are being changed all the time, where they're doing new releases all the time, it'd be very hard for us to do anything.
No, I think you mean Ethereum, because that's the one where they do hard forks, with very short time spans. But it's not like they have too many nodes anyway. So I guess it's becoming easier as it grows and gets more bloated.
Yeah, but that would be hard. That would be very hard. So there are strengths to ossification, though. And again, this is one of the few open source projects that doesn't have a benevolent dictator, which is a good thing in a way. So
yes, and I very much agree with some of your input right here, and I appreciate it. I feel like this is not being discussed enough, and most podcasts are just positivist, and they're like, yes, we're bullish, we're going to the moon. How about we talk about this Michael Saylor tweet and announcement and how much Bitcoin this company bought, and this is the greatest extent to which they discuss what's going on. But that's why I love having developers on the show, as you guys are real, and I enjoyed this space from this perspective. As you said, there is no dictator to establish what our priorities are, which means that there's a constant struggle to figure out where we are heading with Bitcoin, what it is, and what we're going to do next. Are we going to ossify it yet, or do we still need to add stuff to... Basically, I don't think it's going to get changed, but it's going to become more efficient for certain use cases. And the use cases are not imposed by anyone. It's whatever we choose to use it as.
Yeah, I agree. I do think we'll have a few more changes, but probably nothing major. And I hope people like Jeremy are not... we need people... I mean, I don't really know his background. I don't really know who he is. But we do need people like him who are clearly smart to come and be creative and challenge the narrative and build things that maybe other people haven't thought about. Because that's a healthy ecosystem. So.
I've heard very involved people calling Jeremy basically the CIA agent who's trying to infiltrate and destroy this fragile consensus that we are having with a proposal that seems very tame, but at the same time wants to open Pandora's box and destroy Bitcoin in the long term with more proposals that are going to get into speedy trial. But this comes from someone who's actually the CEO of a Bitcoin company. I'm not going to say which one, but we had a private conversation about it, and he was very paranoid about it. I'm sure that Michael Saylor is the CIA, but that's only my, my share of craziness.
He probably has relationships with the CIA, being an American billionaire. I think that's he probably knows the CIA better than me and you do. Put it that way.
It's very likely that, So even if you look at this is deeper down the rabbit hole, because if you look at where the MicroStrategy HQ is and where the Seattle CIA HQ is, that's like 30 minutes of driving. Yeah. So
I think Jeremy's a smart engineer who's thought of something and wants to push it. And I think, it looks like he just didn't get momentum because he couldn't get the right Bitcoin core guys to look at it, because I guess not many people are talking about covenants. That's what it seems. But if there's one positive, people are talking about covenants now. So he has put it back on the map. But I think you have to ignore some of the silliness on Twitter and mailing lists and stuff.
Yeah, and what's the difference? I had this conversation today. What's the difference between covenants and smart contracts, and why are they not advertised as smart contracts? And in my understanding, smart contracts also have recursive payments. So according to an oracle, you decide that on this specific moment, which repeats itself every now and then, you're going to send this amount of a currency. And I don't think you find that in covenants, or am I wrong?
I don't know. I mean, my experience of covenants is looking for is using Liquid, where you have this check sig hash thing where you basically are able to broadcast a value, and there's a conditional spend on that. The recursive covenants, I haven't looked at. I try to have I'm sure people call you and want you to be an expert on everything. But I guess with Mercury, we try and have a very vertical view of the way we achieve like state chains, and not necessarily look at, other things or try and be an expert on everything, which I think helps us.
I appreciate this, the honesty and everything else.
Yeah.
And the fact that you basically approach topics that may have been outside of your comfort zone, but that's what this podcast is about, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a couple of questions that you received from fans of the show, and let me read them. One of them concerns, are you Satoshi Nakamoto?
No.
I mean, sounds like something that Satoshi would say.
Well, someone wrote an article which had about 5 views saying that I was Satoshi, and it was based on the fact that I'm British and that I'm into martial arts. And Satoshi is an Asian-sounding name, and that kind of like made it that I could have been Satoshi. But I think that's what that comment came out of. But no, I'm not a cryptographer. If anyone who knows the original code base of Satoshi knows that it was written by someone who's probably more of a cryptographer than a software engineer, and that clearly isn't me.
I'm more into the Greg Maxwell sock puppetry boat. So Greg Maxwell is Satoshi, if anyone. But anyway, this was a question by Peter Lane, just to give him credit for it. Emmanuel Bitstein wants to know, what are general privacy hacks that you're applying that are easy to integrate into one's life?
Yeah, I mean, I don't use 2FA. I tend to keep my old mobile phones and recondition them into 2FA devices. I'm a big fan of YubiKeys these days. So where I need to, single sign-in stuff, I try and use a YubiKey and then keep multiple of those backups and just things like that. A lot of people think because I'm involved with Mercury, I'm a big privacy guru. I'm not. I just want Bitcoin to work like PayPal does, private. And generally now, because of the amount of data harvesting that goes on, I'm very cautious about what I sign up to when I publish information. I think that's just the way the world's going, and tend to live very much conservative on that stuff.
Yes, and you mentioned YubiKeys. I think everyone listening to this podcast has a Trezor in their drawer. That one can also be used as your 2FA device. You can configure it to authenticate passwords. So I guess if you don't want to buy a new device and I guess you're not traveling with it, it's perfectly fine. You can use it to sign your passwords, not sign, authenticate. Yeah. That's the right word for it. And also have 2 questions from Roxana Nasoy, who is actually the one who set up this interview, and I'm grateful to her. So first of all, she wants to know, how does BJJ, which I guess is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and martial arts philosophy, go with Bitcoin philosophy?
I think, so there's a big difference between BJJ, doing martial arts, and, for me, it's a way of living a stoic lifestyle, being focused on minimalism. I think Bitcoin lends you to be a bit more like that. You tend to want less, but, accumulate Bitcoin and, reject a lot of materialistic assumptions. And I think that's where maybe the relationship for me becomes. And I think it keeps your ego in check. Bitcoin's very complex. There's a lot of facets, but there's always someone smarter than you, brighter than you. And I think when you trade martial arts, you've always got the same challenges there. It keeps you humble.
I did not consider this. I know people who go to the gym and work out for the same purpose, but martial arts, I guess, gets a bad stigma, just like privacy, because...
But there's a big difference between a fighter and someone who trains martial arts. Martial arts is a way of looking after your body, being meditation. It's not going out to the local bar and getting to a punch up. And that's what I have to explain to people, a bit like the way I have to explain, privacy. Privacy is not about doing something nefarious. It's just about common sense of how money should be used.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't want to get into a fight with you either, so take that as you will.
Yeah, okay.
Now that I know you're into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, no, I'm not touching this.
I never said I was good at it, I remember that.
Sure. Sounds like something legit that someone with a black belt would say.
Okay.
And there's another question from Roxana, and I guess you touched upon this, but I guess it's a good way to wrap it up. So what makes Statechains a solid layer 2 solution on Bitcoin next to Lightning and sidechains?
I I think it's more non-custodial than sidechains, more scalable than sidechains. Lightning, it pairs up. The challenge with Lightning is very liquidity efficient. Statechains don't have that issue. Statechains are fixed denominations, and whereas Lightning is non-fixed. So as a partner to Lightning, I think it fits in very well. And I hope, sometimes maybe at Bitcoin Money, people talked about the Bitcoin layer 2s. They only mentioned sidechains and Lightning. I think Statechain should be one of the threesomes there. And I think that's happening thanks to people like you inviting me on your show. So.
Yes. So Nicholas Gregory, this was a really great interview. I'm happy that we have done it. And there's a lot of interesting stuff to be learned from it. And I'm proud that I got to get this out of you. So how can people follow you and follow the Mercury Wallet project?
Yeah, Mercury Wallet, easy to find, MercuryWallet.com. I'm on Twitter, Gregory_Nico.
I think I call the police on you with this podcast.
yeah, sorry. I'm on the police. Yeah, just went by. Yeah, Gregory_Nico. I don't really tweet that much. Probably tweet even less now that someone who's big into AI and data harvesting has bought Twitter. But yeah, easy to, go to MercuryWallet.com. We're quite active on GitHub there.
Okay. So that's really good to know, because we're going to keep on paying attention to what Mercury Wallet is doing, as it's a very useful privacy tool. Thank you very much for being part of the show. And I look forward to having you once again to discuss what else gets released in Mercury Wallet. And also, I'm going to send you one of my magazines so you figure out what I'm into and how you're most likely going to be included in the next release next year.
Great. Sounds good.
Golden Bitcoin, Voltoro, golden Bitcoin, Voltoro, golden Bitcoin, Voltoro, golden Bitcoin, Voltoro.
Voltoro is the exchange where you deal with honest and hard money. There's no fiat on-ramp or off-ramp, and you get to diversify your Bitcoin portfolio into gold or silver when you sense that a bearish moment is coming. Also, you can instantly trade your gold for Bitcoin to buy the dip. And if you're into gold custody, Voltoro can also send you the gold that you own directly from their insured Swiss vaulting facilities. Voltoro was launched in the aftermath of the Mt. Gox hack. So since 2015, they have published monthly glass books to prove that they own all the gold reserves and all of their customers' money. Sign up today by going to voltoro.com/Bitcoin takeover. Keep in mind that this is not financial advice and you are responsible for your own decisions. Wasabi Wallet is the perfect Bitcoin privacy wallet. It's free, it's open source, it's available on Windows, macOS, and Linux, and it offers groundbreaking Chaumian CoinJoins, which makes your Bitcoin. Even if you do not use the CoinJoin feature, you still benefit from a trustless experience with block filters, a hidden IP address via Tor, and easy management of your wallet outputs. After you deal with KYC exchanges like Coinbase, like Kraken, Binance, Gemini, or Bitfinex, you can remove the association between your identity and your Bitcoin address by performing a few rounds of CoinJoins. To find out more about the privacy benefits and limitations of CoinJoins, listen to Bitcoin Takeover Podcast Season 6, Episode 6 with Max Hilbrand. And if you want to give Wasabi a try, go to wasabiwallet.io and download the wallet for free. Wasabi Wallet, a Bitcoin privacy wallet for the citadels.